Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some really big questions. This time, we're tackling eternal life.
Eternal life. We've got a lot to unpack there.
We do. And the listeners did not disappoint with this source material. We're talking ancient rituals, modern science, a little philosophy. It's going to be a wild ride.
It really highlights how universal this fascination is, wouldn't you say? This deep-seated human desire to understand, well, what happens after we're gone? And if we can actually impact the world even after we're not here.
Exactly. And not just like leaving a mark on the world like, I built this, but how different cultures and belief systems have wrestled with the concept of literally living forever, or at least some version of it. But what strikes me looking at everything is how often it comes back to legacy, even if it takes some pretty unexpected forms.
Right. And I think that's a perfect place to start. Let's rewind the clock way back thousands of years to ancient Egypt.
Land of the pharaohs, pyramids, all that jazz.
Exactly. But we're not talking about your typical pharaohs here. We're diving into the 25th dynasty, the time of the Black Pharaohs. Now, these rulers were all about bringing back the golden age of Egypt, restoring its former glory.
So a bit of an ego boost there, wanting to be remembered as the ones who made Egypt great again.
Chuckles, perhaps. But it went beyond just ego. They were obsessed with leaving a physical, tangible mark on the world, something so monumental that it would literally stand the test of time.
If they used go big or go home back then, because wow, did they ever go big? I mean, those temples they built, they dwarfed anything that came before.
They were making a statement, weren't they? Temples, tombs, all designed to showcase their power and ensure their legacy lived on long after they were gone. It was about solidifying their place in history, etched in stone for all eternity.
Speaking of legacies etched in something, let's jump over to the ancient Mesopotamians. Now, these guys were playing a different game altogether, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Instead of colossal structures, they focused on something arguably even more enduring: knowledge. Think about it. Their civilization was born and raised alongside the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, fertile ground for innovation.
And innovate they did. Writing systems, laws, the beginnings of astronomy. It's like they laid the foundation for so much of what we consider civilization today.
It's really remarkable. Their intellectual DNA, so to speak, is woven into the fabric of our world, even if most people don't realize it. But then you've got the animistic traditions, which offer a completely different perspective on what it means to leave a mark.
Okay, animistic traditions. For those of us who haven't spent the last decade buried in anthropology textbooks, remind us what that entails.
Right, so in essence, animism is the belief that everything around us, animals, plants, rivers, even rocks, possesses a spirit. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things, this beautiful web of life that binds us together.
So instead of trying to stand out, to build something that screams, I was here, it's more about becoming one with nature itself.
Exactly. It's a very different way of thinking about legacy, isn't it? Your essence, your spirit, it doesn't just disappear. It becomes part of the fabric of existence, woven into the trees, flowing with the rivers, forever present in the natural world.
That's beautiful. It's like whispering to the wind and knowing that a part of you is carried on in that breeze.
It really makes you think about legacy in a different light, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about statues and stories. It's about recognizing that we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves, this intricate web of life that continues long after we're gone.
And what strikes me is that even though these ancient cultures, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, those practicing animistic traditions, they had wildly different beliefs, they all seem to converge on that fundamental human desire to leave something of themselves behind, to make a mark on the world that transcends our own mortality.
It's a timeless yearning, isn't it? To find meaning and purpose in a world that can often feel fleeting and unpredictable.
And whether we find that meaning in grand monuments, intellectual pursuits, or a deep connection to the natural world, it speaks to the enduring power of legacy, of the impact we have on the world long after we're gone.
It's fascinating how that desire to leave a mark, that yearning for something beyond our own mortality, it kind of echoes through the world's major religions, too.
Right. It's like, what happens after we die? It's the ultimate question. And different religions, well, they've got some pretty different answers, don't they?
They do. And some of them are surprisingly detailed, like take Christianity and Islam, for example.
Both big on the afterlife, right?
Absolutely. Both emphasize this idea of a final judgment, a kind of cosmic courtroom drama where your deeds in life are weighed and you're either rewarded with eternal bliss
or
or not so much.
Yeah, let's not sugarcoat it. We're talking about hellfire and damnation here. High stakes stuff.
Definitely. And these afterlives, they're not just vague concepts. They're described in vivid detail. Take the Islamic concept of Jannah, paradise, gardens of unimaginable beauty, rivers flowing with milk and honey, delights beyond our wildest dreams.
Sounds pretty good, I'm not going to lie. But then you've got Jahannam.
The flip side, right? A fiery abyss for those who stray from the path.
And the Quran, it doesn't shy away from those descriptions either.
Not at all. It's all about emphasizing the importance of living a righteous life, following the Quran's teachings. Like Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 2.82, it talks about how those who believe and do good deeds, they'll have gardens beneath which rivers flow. Eternal bliss, basically. But then you've got verses like Surah Al-Imran 3.15, which describes the punishment for those who disbelieve.
Powerful imagery. It's interesting how both Christianity and Islam use those vivid descriptions of reward and punishment to encourage a certain way of life.
Absolutely. It's about influencing behavior, providing a moral compass.
Yeah.
But then you've got Eastern religions like Hinduism and Buddhism. They take a different approach altogether.
Reincarnation, right. Coming back as a cat or a cow, depending on how well you behaved in this life.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. In Hinduism, it's about the soul, the Atman, taking on new lives based on karma.
Karma, right. What goes around comes around.
Exactly. The actions of your past life influence your next life. It's this continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And the ultimate goal is to break free from that cycle, to achieve moksha, liberation.
So not living forever in the same body, but more like your essence continuing on, learning, evolving through countless lifetimes.
Exactly. And Buddhism shares that idea of reincarnation, this continuous cycle.
But they emphasize the impermanence of everything, right?
Yes. Nothing stays the same.
Right.
Everything is in flux, constantly changing, even the self.
That's a bit of a mind bender right there. It really makes you rethink those big questions, doesn't it? Like, what does it even mean to live forever if we're not the same us from one life to the next?
It challenges our whole understanding of identity, of what it means to exist. And in Buddhism, the ultimate goal is to reach nirvana, which, again, often gets misinterpreted.
Yeah, people hear nirvana and think like some blissful paradise. But it's not about that, is it?
Not quite. Nirvana is more about a state of being, a release from suffering, a liberation from the cycle of birth and death. It's about transcending our attachment to the self, to desire, to this idea of a permanent, unchanging reality.
It's about finding true peace, true liberation, a pretty lofty goal no matter how you slice it.
Absolutely. And even within these broader religious frameworks, you find some really interesting variations.
You mentioned Zoroastrianism earlier. It predates both Christianity and Islam, and they have a unique take on all this, don't they?
Oh, definitely. Zoroastrians also believe in a final judgment.
So similar to Christianity and Islam in that sense.
Sort of. But here's the twist. Zoroastrians believe that eventually all souls will be purified and redeemed, even those who have strayed from the path. It's a more optimistic view, emphasizing the ultimate triumph of good over evil.
Everyone gets a second chance, huh?
In a way, yes. Even the universe itself undergoes a kind of renewal, a purification. And then you have Sikhism, which focuses on the idea of merging with the divine.
Becoming one with God, basically.
Essentially, yes. They call God Waheguru. It's about spiritual growth, devotion, and ultimately achieving union with the divine essence.
So many different beliefs, so many ways of grappling with these huge questions about life, death, and what lies beyond.
It's a testament to the human spirit, don't you think?
Yeah.
This endless quest to find meaning in the face of our own mortality.
It really is. But what happens when we shift gears a bit from the realm of faith to the world of science? When we start looking for the secrets of eternal life, not in scriptures, but in test tubes and under microscopes.
That's when things get really interesting. We're moving from ancient beliefs to cutting-edge science, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
We're talking about hacking the aging code, trying to unravel why we age and if we can actually do something about it, right?
Exactly. And scientists are using some seriously powerful tools these days. And the tools are getting more impressive by the day. I mean, you've got gene editing with things like CRISPR-Cas9, which is like, whoa, straight out of science fiction, right?
It really is. It's like we're on the verge of editing the very code of life itself. But even if we could, say, double or triple our lifespans, it begs the question, then what? What's the point of all that extra time?
The big why, right? And that's where philosophy comes in. Because it's one thing to talk about living longer, it's another to grapple with the meaning of that existence.
Right, because if we're being honest, just existing for centuries doesn't sound that appealing, does it? I mean, think about all the existential dread you could accumulate in that time.
Huh. Well, the philosophers have certainly grappled with that. You've got everything from existentialism, which can get a bit heavy, to theism with its focus on a higher power, and then there's humanism, trying to find that middle ground.
Let's dig into existentialism for a bit, because we did have that excerpt by Jean-Paul Sartre and his whole thing about being condemned to be free. It's a real head-scratcher, isn't it?
It is. But it's not so much about doom and gloom as it is about radical responsibility. Existentialists believe there's no grand plan, no predetermined meaning to life.
So we're all just making it up as we go along.
In a way, yes. We're thrown into this existence, and it's up to us to make choices that give it meaning.
Which makes you wonder, if we lived forever, would those choices even matter? Like, if you have an infinite amount of time, do your actions really have any weight?
That's a question Sartre wrestled with. He believed that if we were immortal, our actions would lose their significance.
It'd be like playing a video game with cheat codes, right?
Exactly. Where's the challenge? The risk.
Existentialists argue that our mortality, the fact that our time is limited, is what gives our choices meaning, agency.
Every moment becomes more precious because it might be our last.
Right. Now, on the flip side, you have theists, those who believe in a higher power. They often find meaning in the idea that life has a divine purpose, a plan orchestrated by something greater than ourselves. So it's less about carving your own path and more about aligning yourself with a preordained journey, living a life that fulfills a higher purpose.
Exactly. Whether it's preparing for an afterlife, serving a deity, or fulfilling the role they believe they were created for, it's about finding meaning and purpose in something outside of themselves.
Which can be comforting, that sense of belonging, of having a predetermined place in the grand scheme of things. But what about those who don't quite fit into either camp? Where does humanism come in?
Humanism offers a more grounded approach. They believe that we can find meaning and purpose in life without relying on supernatural beliefs or subscribing to a specific dogma.
So less about what comes after we die and more about how we live our lives right now.
Exactly. They value reason, compassion, and the betterment of humanity as a whole.
It's about making the most of this life, however long or short it may be. Building relationships, contributing to society, leaving the world a little better than we found it.
It's a beautiful philosophy, really. And it brings us back to that concept of legacy. Because whether we believe in an afterlife or not, we all leave something behind.
It's those ripples, isn't it? The impact of our actions, our words, the connections we forge.
And it doesn't have to be some grand, sweeping gesture. Sometimes it's the small things that matter most.
Planting a tree, mentoring someone, creating something beautiful, it all adds up.
It really does. It's that recognition that we are all part of something larger than ourselves. That even after we're gone, our actions can continue to have an impact.
You know, after this deep dive, I'm realizing that eternal life isn't necessarily about living forever in a literal sense, but about the mark we leave on the world, the legacy we build.
Wow.
And that's something we all have the power to shape, regardless of our beliefs or how long we happen to be around.
Beautifully said, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've journeyed through ancient beliefs, explored cutting-edge science, and grappled with profound philosophical questions. And while there may not be any easy answers, the search for meaning, for purpose, for connection, that's what ultimately makes this human experience so incredibly rich and fascinating.
It really is. So to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, challenged your assumptions, and maybe even inspired you to ponder your own place in this grand tapestry of life. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to make your mark on the world.